We're there. Hello, Facebook land. So good to see you. And yes, my cat is joining us today. But the real star of the show is Dr. Molly Colvin. Oh my gosh, guys, if y'all don't know Dr. Colvin, she's like amazing, incredible. There have been a few webinars that I've watched of her, and I'll plop the links in the chat for everybody who wants to go and watch those as well. But man, she just gets our families in a way that maybe the only other person who has rivaled her is Dr. Natalie Truba. But seriously, Dr. Colvin, you just got this big picture of things and how they fit together, and it's amazing. And I'm so excited to share your wisdom and your expertise with our community today, and maybe even some of their extended family and friends, so they can help understand.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here and would be in great company with Dr. Truba. So also check her work out because it's wonderful. Yeah.
We love her. We may have had her on one or two webinars. Yeah, and it's, she has chatted with us several times about the physiological response with the lack of dystrophin in the brain. And, it's just helped me as a mother build so much compassion for my child. Can you hear my dog moving the box around in the background? Should I? Yeah. This is real life, Dr. Colvin.
It's real life. I mean, I've told you, mine is here with me too. And he's sleeping.
I love it. Fantastic. Yeah, so I really, I'm just really intrigued by this psychosocial component of Duchenne, because it's so much more than just a muscle disease. So more. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking because you are by far the more interesting one. And I just wanted to give you a moment to introduce yourself and all of your amazing credentials and your experience with our community.
Oh, well, thank you again for having me today. So I am a clinical psychologist by training, and I do a specialty version of that called neuropsychology, where I see kids who have different developmental trajectories, sort of for lots of reasons, and Duchenne may be one of them. And I like to say that my job is sort of to characterize an individual child's strengths and their vulnerabilities or weaknesses, and help everybody around them, parents, schools, providers, sort of understand it so that we can really make tailored interventions that move everybody, including the family, forward. And I've really had the privilege of working with the Duchenne community now for almost 10 years, I would say, and I've learned a tremendous amount from all of you about how to do this well. And I think one of the things that has been most exciting to me as a neuropsychologist over the last few years, over that span of time, has really been how our understanding of dystrophin and its role in the brain has shifted. I mean, when I was in graduate school, we were really told that this was a neuromuscular disease and that there wasn't really anything that involved sort of behavior and emotion and learning. And then I started seeing patients and was like, really? Like, it seems like there's, sort of a profile here of things that we can expect kids to sort of grow and develop and have lots of normal abilities, and then also have potentially a greater risk for having difficulties in some areas. It doesn't impact everybody, but it does impact enough that I think it's worth talking about. And that's been some of the work that I've been involved in, along with Natalie Truba and some other wonderful people.
Oh, we are so grateful for you, because, I feel like in our community, sometimes parents are looking at each other saying, am I crazy? And it's not just me and my family, right? And so it's just amazing to have a professional validate and listen to us when we talk about what we're going through, and providing support and help as well.
Yeah.
So just so grateful for that. So today we're gonna try to tackle some big things, Dr. Colvin.
Okay.
We are going to try to tackle some of the common challenges that a family with a child or children with Duchenne experience. And yes, absolutely. This is not a blanket statement for all families. It's, that's never the case. But as you said, there's a propensity. So let's kind of talk about it. So we'll be talking about family dynamics. We'll be talking about extended family and friends and those patterns. We'll be talking about school and, even just society at large and what our families face. And, I'm going to have you look in a crystal ball and also tell us what we can do to fix all this. So,
Okay.
hope you're ready.
I'll try to pull out the magic wand too.
Oh, you got one of those? Thank you. Hide all the good stuff. I mean, okay. So as I've said before, we have talked with Natalie before, and she's given us lots of information on the brain and dystrophin, but can you give us just a short, succinct kind of overview for families or extended family and friends, or even teachers who may not be familiar?
Sure. So dystrophin is the protein that's really most impacted in Duchenne. And like I was saying, what we've really come to understand in the last decade or so is that it's not just expressed in muscle, it's also expressed in brain. And it's not expressed evenly throughout the brain. So there are certain regions in the brain that are more impacted by others in the reduced dystrophin level. And so those areas that typically have a higher expression of dystrophin are actually regions that are really important in skills related to learning and memory and emotion regulation, as well as sort of integrating information. And so what we've increasingly begun to understand is that for some who have especially certain genetic mutations, that there may be some of those regions in the brain that may be sort of on a different developmental trajectory, and that manifests as differences in terms of the way information is being processed and emotion regulation, and also to some extent sort of social interactions. And so when we think developmentally about what children with Duchenne need, we also need to recognize it's not just the medical kind of physical piece, but it may also be around psychological and cognitive and learning issues. And that those are important to recognize. And I think, from a family perspective, what I often see is that, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, there's a huge sort of learning curve that happens when the diagnosis is new, and that is mostly concentrated on sort of the stabilization of the medical condition and sort of preparing for everything that kind of comes from that and all of the therapies and all of the medicines and everything else. But once that sort of settles out, the issues around learning and emotions and cognition may actually be some of the issues that actually need more intensive attention and sort of chronic attention to promote good quality of life and family functioning.
Oh, that's beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself, Dr. Colvin. Yeah, no, and again, I'm just so glad. I'm so glad that you're here talking about this, because truly, truly, for a good, meaningful, purposeful life, the inclusion, the social component, the self-determination, the self-efficacy, having role models, knowing that it's possible, all of those things are so vastly important, and there are some individuals with Duchenne that I've talked with, and they're like, yeah, the physical part's not a problem. It's all of this other stuff, trying to live this life. Those are the challenges. And man, I'm giving myself chills right now. Okay. So thank you for laying that groundwork about the the psychology and the behavioral. Yeah, and I guess that's what I was going to say. All of this dystrophin changes can lead into the behavioral components, the big meltdowns. The rigidity, the OCD, and I'm speaking from experience. I'm living this with my child. And so yeah, far, far more than just a muscle disease. So could you walk us through that briefly now? Kind of, and again, briefly, this is just an overview today of 50 things. Walk us through that overview of what happens for the parent when they receive that diagnosis, because they're really at the core of the family unit and they really drive the direction the family is going to be going.
Mhm. I think diagnosis is its own sort of intense period. And I think everybody is on their own trajectory about that too. For some people, it's probably a short period and they sort of can move through it fairly quickly. And I think for other people, it can be a very long period. And it can also be one that you sort of move in and move out of. And I think everybody's experience of that needs to sort of be okay. I think it's normal at the beginning to sort of experience kind of fear and shock, and to also have it be somewhat traumatic for a family, and that it really puts families on an immediate learning curve. So in the midst of sort of being potentially afraid and fearful and being somewhat traumatized, you're also then put on a really steep learning curve where you're sort of expected to kind of come up to speed on a lot of new things very quickly. So understandably, that's overwhelming. It's really hard to be on a steep learning curve when, anxiety and worry and all and fear is sort of chewing up all of your brain power. And so it's a really difficult time, I think, for family, and really important that there be support around that. And I would say, it should be especially around the parents in that phase, but especially also, I think there needs to be some attention to mothers who I think have a different experience of Duchenne in particular. I think grief is also normal and is something that sort of comes, and I can't say we sort of fully understand the grief that kind of comes around a life-altering diagnosis for a child. When I think everybody's sort of familiar with the stages of grief that were sort of first elucidated by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross back in the 60s, where they talk about denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance. And it sort of was laid out as kind of a linear trajectory that you sort of follow, but it was really conceptualized around someone dying. And that's not what's happening. And yet there's a lot of grief. And so I think more recently, people have been sort of thinking about grief associated with raising a child who has a chronic illness and what that does on the family system, and recognizing that there are different variables that sort of impact how a family experiences grief, including things like what type of illness is it, the time phase of the illness. And so that's what I mean by being able to move in and out of it. It's not sort of a one-time thing usually that is just about diagnosis and then never crops up again. It sometimes crops up again and again. And I think I probably shared this with you, but it was actually shared with me from a family that I was working with. There was a poem that was called sort of Welcome to Holland. Have you heard this one? You've heard it. And I don't know if we even have time. If you have time and I have it up, I could actually read it, because I just think it's wonderful, in sort of capturing for so many families sort of what that initial experience is like.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with it, and I think it's incredibly insightful. So if you have it available
I
right now,
do.
please, this is the perfect time.
All right, well, let me just, it's not too long, so bear with me here. This is a poem by Emily Pearl Kingslake, and it's called Welcome to Holland. And it says, when you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and you make your wonderful plans, the Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. And after months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. And several hours later, the plane lands and the stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life, I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you never would have met. It's just a different place. It's a slower pace than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they've had. And for the rest of your life, you'll say, yes, that was where I was supposed to go. That was what I had planned. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland.
Made it through without crying, Dr. Colvin. That's great. Yeah, and that one just resonates with me. I mean, oh, in so many ways. But this isn't my therapy session. We're picking your brain about something. So yeah, that's fantastic. And something I've read before is grief is a type of learning. You're learning how to exist in the presence of this loss. And here it's the loss of a dream, it's the loss of an idea. And so yeah, that fascinates me. And I love she describes it perfectly. It's not bad. It's just
different. And I think what comes out of that is, when you say, I fully agree with that it's sort of a type of learning. And sometimes people think about the yin and the yang, right? And so out of grief and loss also comes growth. You have to sometimes let things go in order to grow. And so one of the things that I think sometimes happens after you sort of move through that grief phase is there is a sort of rebirth with a new identity and a new way of making meaning in the world that can be really beautiful. And it involves sort of, rearranging family priorities. It may be sort of, focusing more on the present than it is about what happens in the future. There may be new dreams that sort of come up and are imagined, and you make meaning in a different way. And it really changes the way that I think you view parenting and your child, but that also, makes for some complications, because it may sort of call into question sort of values and existential questions, but also when you have an affected child and have an unaffected child, how do you sort of walk those lines, and what does it mean in the context of your whole community and your broader family? That's complicated territory to navigate. But I absolutely believe that out of this often comes really meaningful growth for everybody.
Golly, you do know our community, don't you? I just want to focus one more thing on the parents, because like I said, they really drive this experience for the whole family, not just their kiddos with Duchenne, but their kiddos without Duchenne too. Yeah. From all of the research and talking with Natalie and looking at all of the PubMed, all of that research stuff. I just want to really underscore, and hopefully you'll back me up on this, how life-changing and traumatic this experience can be for the parent's brain. It can really, truly, from what I've read, from the allostatic, oh, my brain's not working. My brain's not working.
Yeah, allostatic, yeah.
From all of the experiences of simply parenting a child with a terminal disease, you are fundamentally, physiologically more prone to anxiety and depression.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that we are still, I think, at the very beginning of understanding this, but it's pretty widely accepted at this point that chronic stress of any type changes your body in ways that it's hard to kind of fully understand. I think it's certainly when you are raising a child who has a terminal illness, but you're also sort of working really hard to make things as good as everything can possibly still be, and you're sort of navigating the day-to-day stressors that are a lot just to start with around work and finances and living and all of those other kinds of things. To add this on top just sort of makes it a kind of a chronic stressor that doesn't really sort of go away, right? And we know that that changes the way that your body responds to new stressors. We also know that it changes things about, your sleep and how you feel about yourself. And, therefore, it puts you at significant risk for sort of anxiety and depression. because there isn't a way to really make it end. And so it requires kind of a frame shift of developing some coping strategies that help you sort of manage all of that all the time. And that requires really learning new skills. And as we were sort of talking about a few minutes ago, it's hard to learn new skills when you're under stress. It's actually harder to do when you're sort of experiencing that. So there also needs to be a fair amount of grace and sort of saying, I'm not going to do this perfectly all the time, but I'm going to keep working on this. And I think that it's also, I think, normalizing that you are learning and that you're working on developing. You're learning to sort of like ride a bike while you're actually on the bike. You're sort of like, you're going to fall off and it's going to be okay. And you just have to get back up and keep going. But it's also important to know when you need help and to also pay attention to all those things and build space into your life for that too.
Um, Thank you for that. And my apologies for laughing at such horrible, horrible experiences. It's all you can do to cope sometime, right? It's just impossible. How am I living this, right?
Yes,
Crazy.
that being honest, it's sort of having a laugh every now and then can be very healing. So
Crazy.
finding community like you're doing today and
Yeah.
creating community is really important too.
So we can all laugh at ourselves together, right? Let's move briefly into parenting traps that parents tend to fall into with, both their kids with Duchenne and without.
Yes. So this is one also where I've learned from the community too, and sort of even talking with unaffected siblings about sort of what their experience has been. And, I think that some of the things that are kind of common parenting traps, whenever a child has actually even a neurodevelopmental condition, I sort of sometimes have the same conversations with families where they have a child with autism or they have a child with a learning disability and they have other unaffected siblings, and sort of it's hard because you wind up sort of creating maybe separate expectations and separate rules, and the other kids are like, well, why do they get to do what the other one doesn't get to do? And so I think it's really important, I think, to kind of within the family have some language about that and sort of say that part of parenting is about meeting the needs of the child. So if you have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, you're not going to expect the same thing from the 5-year-old either. And so making that sort of transparent and clear to the siblings, I think can sometimes be really helpful. But some of the traps that I think parents fall into is to kind of minimize the impact on a child or siblings. I mean, I've heard some teenagers talk about how it was really hard that they got to be sort of 12 or 13 or 14 before Duchenne was even discussed with them. And and what that meant, and they had questions, but they didn't have the space to sort of talk through that. And I think that it's important to start, just like any of those hard conversations you have in life, those are ones that you kind of want to have on an ongoing basis and sort of circle back to them over a child's growth and development in a developmentally appropriate way. That's hard, and it's especially hard when you as the parent are also sort of on your own learning curve about how you're and being comfortable talking about it. But it is important to sort of have the conversation in some way while also sort of making it clear that the sibling is not expected to sort of step into the role of parenting or caregiving, right? So you have to sort of walk that line. It's really tough. I think some of the other really common parenting traps, though, too, can also be relaxing the rules and the structure around the affected child. And that's, you still have a child who's sort of growing and developing and needs to function in the world. And so it's really important to still parent around that and have kind of structure and expectations, sort of expectations about what life is going to look like and living to the fullest and finding meaning and making sure that everything is to the best that it can be. And I think the other one that kind of comes along with that sometimes is around overprotection and sort of limiting or pulling back from experiences. But I'm sure you also have thoughts as a parent too about some of these.
Oh yeah, these are fun ones. And it's so tricky balancing physical health, fall and fractures and, hospital stays versus psychosocial health and personal development. It's like, God, how
Really
do you do
hard.
it? Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think, you understandably, if you have a fall or a fracture or hospitalization or even just a difficult clinic day,
Yeah.
of course you want to sort of like take a minute and breathe and take care of your child and comfort them and relax some expectations. And that's okay, but it also then has to be like, not every day is the day where you go out for ice cream, right? The next day you still might have to like get up and kind of go to school. And so there is, and that's important. That's important for your child with Duchenne to sort of feel like they belong in their community and with their peers, to sort of have the same expectations, sort of normalizes their belonging, as well. So it's important to be able to kind of hold the both and around those things.
Uh, Man, and I just want to give a quick shout out, thank you to the generation of parents who came before who we have now, because I feel like we've learned from all of their experiences and they didn't have the benefit of doctors guiding and reflecting and thinking. So yeah, thank you parents. And like my good friend DJ Kimball here, thank you for being the guinea pigs so we could learn from you. Thank you guys. Okay, fantastic. Okay. And now quickly, let's go into the next step. And again, thank you for just helping set the stage, because there is far more beyond the nuclear family, but it's so important to know what's going on in our lives, because it's really hard for extended family and friends to understand, especially when we put on that happy face so that the kids can have a good time at the birthday parties and the holiday, et cetera, et cetera. So chat with us briefly, if you can, about partner relationships, the marriage, all that good stuff.
I think what we know is that for any family where there's a child with a chronic illness, including Duchenne, is that it's incredibly stressful in a marriage and a partnership. And it's really important to take care of the marriage and the partnership, because you need each other, and in terms of being able to kind of figure out how you're going to share responsibilities, and it gives space. If one of you is having a hard day, then the other one might be able to sort of step up. It's just really important to kind of have that balance. But some of the common struggles that I think kind of come up in marriage and partnerships is really around patient caregiver imbalance. It's pretty common sort of for one parent to be the primary caregiver, and then the other sort of takes the responsibilities for everything else. But it's actually important to sort of practice a little more equality in sharing some of those things, so that if one of you is sick, then your whole family is not going to be thrown off because the other parent doesn't know what that schedule looks like, or but also so your kids know that you're both sort of equally capable of handling things. And I think that's especially important for your child with Duchenne, that they know that it's not just mom who knows all the doctors and the medications, but dad can do it too. He might do it differently, but he can still do it. Right? So I think negotiating those shared responsibilities is really important, but it's also, I think, creates some intimacy within your partnership too. If you sort of feel like you're sharing it and it's a joint experience, and one of you is not sort of going through a different experience within your own family, I think that's where some of the conflict comes up, is when you have a division of roles like that doesn't allow for the sharing, and then the other one sort of loses track of what the other's experience is like. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah.
And yeah, along those lines, I would love to toss in too, because this is something, I've experienced in my marriage. My husband and I grieve differently. And I got to a point where I was ready to, all right, let's do something. Let's jump in. Let's, whatever. And he's taken a little different route. And so that can create some tensions.
When I was talking earlier about how you can kind of go in and out of that period, I think it's hard when you're doing that, you're out of phase with each other. It's also hard when you're in phase with each other too, right? So if you're like both grieving at the same time, that's also a hard thing. But I think, people have different ways of expressing stress too. And I think even within the partnership, having clear communication about not just about negotiation of who's doing what, but also about how you're feeling, and that each of you is sort of aware of how your partner may show stress or may not show stress, or sort of may be down or may not be down. This is, I think, where it's really also important to pull in community support, because I think for marriage or partnership to really sort of survive and thrive, it requires your village in this sort of a situation to sometimes take some of the load, so that you can potentially, even if it's not date night, you can like sit on the front porch together and like sit there for 30 minutes and have a conversation, without sort of taking care of everything else. And that may mean that grandma's got to come for an evening, and she's going to do it her own way, and it's not going to be your way. But if it gives you a minute with your partner to sort of reconnect and find a way of enjoying each other and getting back on the same page, it's really important.
Yes, agreed. And if I can just, in the interest of comedy, point out how much our children with Duchenne love change, and they love having different people and do things differently.
Yeah.
How easy it is.
Yeah.
But yes, no, you're absolutely right. There can be some pros to being at different points. If mom's having a tough day, dad can, jump in and take care of that.
And what that actually is really important. I actually think we should, if it's okay with you, stop for a second there, because you're talking about kind of the profile. We're kind of shifting back to sort of what are some of the common kinds of vulnerabilities or for those with Duchenne. And I think they, like a lot of kids, but particularly, maybe sort of the volume maybe turned up a little bit here, is that they often like to have things to be kind of the same way, and change is harder to navigate. And so that pleasing your child, or sort of meeting your child's preference for sameness and flexibility and rigidity, can sometimes, if you always meet it, decrease their ability to learn how to be flexible and to adjust to change. And so it's I think sometimes with parenting, you want to accommodate your child so that you don't risk having a tantrum or a meltdown, or sort of losing it because that's not the way that this is usually done. But by always accommodating it, you also reduce your child's ability to kind of learn to be flexible and adjust and roll with things. And then also you're increasing the pressure on yourself to always be the one who's there, to always be the one who's doing it the same way.
So funny enough, so our son with Duchenne is 11, and then we also have a 4-year-old daughter. And this is really fun, because I am seeing, and this is related, believe me, I'm seeing my daughter exhibit a lot of these Duchenne tendencies. And she's been tested, she's not a carrier, elevated CK, but whatever. And so it's really fun to think about how the siblings may model their own behavior after the other individual, their siblings with Duchenne, even whether they're older or younger. And just overall share my own experience, I find myself making decisions often, I'm just going to say often, for our family unit based on how much stress we're experiencing at the time. It's just I'm like, okay, we need to be able to get through today and tomorrow, so what am I going to do to just let everybody breathe a little bit,
Yeah. And I think that's okay, right? And it's at least in my house, that's a mac and cheese night. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, I know I want to make it the floor, but I can't today, right? But it can't be that way every day. I think that's the other piece. You sort of, and so sort of the next day, sort of being able to take a deep breath means that the next day you can actually sort of go through it again and do it better, and sort of giving yourself permission to sort of make it easy, or have pizza that night instead of sort of everything else that you wanted to do.
So 4 or 5 nights in a row of mac and cheese,
It's, you could mix some peas in. It might be okay.
Hot dogs, maybe,
Exactly.
Velveeta with shells. Okay, yes, we could go on and on. Now, a very interesting component, and after we talk about this, we'll move on past the nuclear family. But I loved hearing you talk about in some of your lectures about the cultural expectations of gender and also the cultural expectations of multi-generational households.
Mhm.
My father-in-law was Greek, and so I would always hear my sister-in-law kind of chatting about, yeah, when I visited Greece, my cousin and her mother, and on and on. I'm like, really? Does it really happen anymore? That's such a long time ago. But yeah, man, no. And so let's start off with those gender roles and how they can be imposed and how you may not feel like you have any choice.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting thinking about it across cultures, but if we sort of just even start within the US, I think there is definitely a kind of a cultural expectation about mothers sort of being primarily responsible for their child who has an illness and sort of being the person who sort of takes care of, keeps track of the appointments and medications and calls the insurance company and all of those kinds of things. And I mean, I say this even being the director of a clinic. I mean, even within I have to be really careful sort of around our language about, well, what did mom say, right? And sort of saying, well, what did the parent say? But the reality is probably 90% of the parents who come into our clinic are moms. Um, and I think that when you are sort of in a family though, and I think with Duchenne, given the way that it's sort of transmitted genetically too, I think it's especially likely that it's mom who sort of assumes the responsibility around that. And also, I mean, I think many mothers carry sort of a guilt around that, whether they're a carrier or not. And there's sort of a guilt associated with that then propels them to sort of kind of, overdo it sometimes and sort of taking responsibility. But I think it is important, when we talk about kind of solid family functioning, it does often involve, while there may be one parent who's sort of leading, that there really is a team. And, I think sometimes when I've talked with single parents, it's incredibly challenging, and it's often sort of, it's often moms again who sort of are with their child by themselves, and talking with those parents about how important it is that they do have a community, whether it's their sister or their brother or their mother or their best friend, that there's somebody, at least a couple people, sort of helping to kind of bear that with them, so that they're not isolated. Because the isolation around caregiving can really increase your risk around anxiety and depression. And so I think it's important that we talk about that, but also and talk about what it's like for women. That I think there is also for men, there's a different sort of experience. And you talked about kind of the grief maybe around this, about the loss of their son and sort of what that it feels like for them too. So I think it's important to sort of recognize sort of both perspectives about this. And that there may be a difference around that. And it kind of comes back to what we were talking about with the partnership before too.
I could toss something in real quick, actually two little somethings. And I've also heard in our community that the dads, if they are the breadwinner, they can have this incredible pressure because they feel like if I don't perform, then I'm not going to make the money. We might lose our health insurance. They
Right.
just feel like the weight of the world is on them, and sometimes they feel like if by prioritizing their job, they're prioritizing their family.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point. And I think it's something, especially in US culture, where healthcare is tied to your job. It's something that I think, in talking with communities outside of the US, they don't feel that as acutely, I think, as many American fathers do.
Yes, we we have a Tuesday night support group, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know lots of families from Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, and yeah, a common topic is American healthcare.
Yeah.
It's fun. And then one other component, and again, this is just part of the nuclear family. I'm glad you brought up the dynamics and the grief between the mother and child. But something Natalie's taught me, and it's just given me a whole new appreciation. I'm not a carrier, but for the moms who are, their physiological state can very much mimic and instigate their child with Duchenne.
Mm.
So there's this added layer of, if it's bedtime and mom's kind of exhausted, well, kiddo can feed off of that, and the mom feeds off of that, and then it's this tendency to have an explosion. And yes, it's hard in all of the families, but there's that extra layer that my family may not be experiencing.
Mhm.
And of course that feeds into the marriage and all of that good stuff, but just
Mhm.
wanted to make a note of that. And if you have anything to add, would love to hear.
No, I think that's very true. And it can come from, other places too. I mean, I think it's sort of just this, there's only, I sometimes think about, every family has a bucket and you can pour stress into it up until a point, and then it starts to spill all over the floor. And the stressors can be any number of things, but they can also be sort of intrinsic things about the parent too, about just, we're all different in terms of how we process and stress and cope with stress, and our thresholds for when we've sort of had enough and what that looks like. And that just sort of makes up the whole family's composition. But you're right, when you're operating kind of close to the top of the bucket, the stress bucket, that's a place where everybody will start to kind of spill over, and it'll look like, especially for your children with Duchenne, meltdowns and difficulty kind of coping, and that just sort of makes it harder for parents to sort of cope when they don't have enough left in the tank to do it.
Dr. Colvin, I don't think my family got one of those buckets. How do I get one of them?
It's there somewhere. You can, everybody sort of has their own where they can cope with a certain amount of stress before it goes over. And you get
Um,
the peace.
you find the bucket with the mac and cheese, right? Okay. Okay, great. And then briefly, okay, so yeah, we talked about the how in the States at least, men tend to go towards the breadwinner and women tend to fall into the caregiving category. I still feel like in America we've got a little bit of flexibility, a little bit more. Um, than some of the other cultures. Are you able to talk about that just a little bit? Because gosh, just hearing the experiences of friends in India or China, places, countries in Africa, it's just,
It's very different.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think, broadly, sometimes the way what I've sort of learned in talking with people from around the world is that there's different cultures differ in terms of their openness and acceptance around disability generally, right? And while we struggle a lot on, say, the health insurance front, America in general, I think, is probably more open and inclusive to sort of talking about diversity and neurodiversity, and further along and sort of thinking and having it even legislated around sort of disability access and awareness, and everybody being able to sort of have openness. So when we talk about our public schools, we have federal legislation that sort of means that every child has a right to a free and appropriate public education. And that's regardless of disability or illness, and accommodations need to be made both for the physical and medical needs, but also for the learning needs. That doesn't exist in every country around the world. And so I think too, when you sort of talk about, families that sort of may come from different places in the world, there also may sort of be greater shame and less willingness to sort of talk about kind of these issues that we're talking about today. I think Americans generally are more open about sort of talking about these issues. So there may be sort of different stigma. And I think sometimes you kind of run into this even with strangers, that they sort of have a different view, or frankly, it's sort of, limited perspective on these issues. And that can make it hard, sort of even within a family where you've got people sort of with different backgrounds and different beliefs, and sort of meeting people where they are and trying to kind of move them along so that they're open and inclusive around these things too. But it's going to be really hard.
And that leads us beautifully into, now that I feel like we've painted a pretty solid picture of what's happening in the nuclear family. There's support. the initial reaction is, okay, extended family and friends. Let's go to them, see how they can help. And over and over and over in the community, I just hear how extended family members and friends disappear.
Mm-hmm.
They're just gone. Or the other one is this rush of support, and I've got you, and we're gonna do this together, and we're gonna, save his life. And then it kind of peters out.
Yeah.
So can you help us understand, maybe a little bit about why people do tend to disappear, or why they're not gonna stay in the long run with us, and how how do we get that support? How do we find somebody to come to our house so we can sit on the front porch with
Yeah.
our spouse
Yeah.
who understands that if my kid is running in his socks, we might be going to the hospital later.
Right. 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 I think that's what you're describing is really common, and it's really hard. And it certainly also compounds to the grief period too, and the sort of moving in and out of it, but also to some of the risk around anxiety and depression. Because you need the social support. And you're right. I think this is something that is super common, where right after diagnosis, everybody sort of rushes in and wants to kind of help. And I was talking with a mom once who's called it the casserole phase. She's like, I got lots of casseroles, but then we got to like year 2 and I wasn't really getting any casseroles anymore. And I'm kind of needed some sometimes. And so I think part of it is that we don't always do a great job in our culture about sort of being explicit and asking for help. I think this is something, at least in our culture, there's especially in like the 20th century, a lot of American families sort of moved away from their immediate families. They sort of may not be, your parents may not be down the street. They may be sort of in a different state. And there was the fabric of sort of the immediate and extended family of sort of being able to stay with you through this isn't really available to everybody. And that was sort of those are the people that are more likely, if they're sort of moving in and out of your house, regardless of whether it's clean or not, to sort of be able to kind of come in, for those short periods of time, and to know your house well enough so that they can sort of step in if needed. And in the absence of that, I think it's actually then really important to sort of verbalize what you need. And it may be that you have to sort of say, I really need you to your best friend. I really would mean a lot to me if you'd come over once every couple of weeks and just sit with me from 9 to 10, and we watch a bad TV show or talk about something, or you have a book club where you're sort of talking about the book, but just so that there are things that are touch points for you with your community people, so you don't lose it, and you practice sort of saying, I need this. And when it's easier to say something like, could you please pick up my other child today because we have an appointment downtown? And all of those things are hard to do, I think, if you're sort of not practicing it regularly. But I think that most of the time, other people are your good friends and your community are willing to sort of do that. I think a lot of people find this also through community organizations, including church and sort of faith-based organizations. I think a lot of people sort of find that it's easier, it's more normalized within those settings to sort of say, I need this right now, and for somebody to sort of step in and hold that space. But however you define it and however you access it, I think it's important to sort of have your tribe of people who are in those sort of supporting roles so that you feel like there's a buffer, especially when the emergencies happen.
And man, like I said earlier, I hear a lot of Duchenne parents, myself included, just kind of chatting online. Am I crazy? Am I crazy? Can you please verify? And what I love about our community is, man, our families are tight. We
Yeah.
are we are just tired. I've never met you. I don't know you, but you know what? I will offer for you to PM me anytime you need to, and I will walk you through that crying spell that you're having. It's just amazing. And agreed, most definitely, we do need that physical help. And there's so many challenges to that. But I also find within our community just a little bit of validating.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, it's
And to know that it's there and that you can access it sort of feels like there's somebody in your corner, even if you're not talking to them all the time. So
yeah. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, Dr. Colvin, if I may.
absolutely.
Uh,
How I
so
learned.
fantastic. That I can help you learn a lot. No.
I'm sure.
Yes, agreed, most definitely. Extended family, friends, and what I'm running into, I'm the youngest of four. My siblings all have their own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, God bless her, I love her. She's a good 33, 34 years older than me. She just had hip replacement.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, Lindy, how can I help? How can I help? I can do stretches. Mom, you can't get up off the floor.
Right.
And so there's a point where people are living their own lives, and or parents who would actually come into your house and take the below minimum wage that you're offering them, because that's what the Medicaid waiver program offers. Um, the it just shifts. I don't know what shifts, but it shifts. So that's a tricky one. And if you have any great ideas.
I think that is a tricky one. I think, with and it's a common, I think it's especially as people sort of have had children later too, it's common to sort of be in that sandwich generation. So I've certainly heard families talk about how they're sort of raising their child with a chronic medical condition of Duchenne, and then they're also taking care of their aging parents, and that's also sort of its own unique set of challenges there. And I think there it may be that they can't do sort of the physical piece, but that maybe they can talk to you, or they can text you, or sort of say, how are you today? But they can also read a story to your younger child, or say, I'll order the groceries for you and send them to you. Like they're sort of thinking about kind of concrete, sort of specific ways, and it may sort of be on the emotional side than even on the kind of physical side, or why don't I make that phone call for you today? Those are hard things to sort of be that tangible. And I think when you're sort of running from one thing to the next, as many parents are, it's really hard. You're just like, I'm just going to keep doing this myself. And that's part of that practice thing about sort of like taking a step back and saying, I could ask for help around this, but I have to kind of almost think about it or anticipate it a little bit.
Yeah, and I have to say I fall in that trap, because sometimes my poor brain energy is so low that it's easier for me to do it than to find the words to explain.
Yes.
And a fun other complicating matter to this, and maybe it just falls into pride, but it's hard for me, at least, to ask and ask and ask and ask, and not really have the capacity to give back much. That's a hard one. It's kind of a blow to the ego.
That is a hard one. And sometimes it may be helpful to just say that, right? To just say, I feel badly that I can't give to you as much as you give to me. And most people are going to say, it's okay, but maybe you have to say it, sometimes say it so that it actually feels okay.
So you're saying we have to talk to people, Dr. Colvin?
Yeah.
Really?
In the long run, it might make things a little easier.
No, this is good. This is good. This is very, very enlightening, and giving us some ideas. And just talking about it and validating it. It's so good for me. It's so good for my heart, to know I'm not crazy. It's not a recurring theme. So that's fantastic. I do we've got 1 minute left, Dr. Colvin.
Oh my goodness, how did we get there?
I know, right? Yeah, we could blow all through this.
I know.
Talk just a little bit more, and I guess this is more just to help paint the picture for extended family and friends to understand, because I know our families feel it. But going into a little bit more the stigma from society at large. You're talking in one of your wonderful webinars, and again, I'm going to pop them in. And I love that one from the ECHO, the Pediatric Association.
Oh,
I was just
good.
like,
Yeah.
this is her. I need her. But the idea of when mainstream society sees an individual in a wheelchair, it's just don't ask, don't look, avoid eyes. And so it's hard to find friends for our kids. It's hard to find friends for parents. There's just, and I'm saying this all for you, I would really love to hear your words, but between the inaccessibility in just the public transportation not accommodating, on and on. Could you just draw that out a little bit more and explain some of the big social challenges we face, even if it's not support, even if it's just camaraderie and friendship for our kids and therefore our whole family?
Yeah. I think this is an area, I was talking a little while ago about how comparatively speaking, the US is probably more open around sort of disability culture. And yet I think we have such a long way to go around this, like such a long way to go. I feel a little bit of hope. I'm sort of going to end on, since we're coming to the end, I'll end on sort of a hopeful piece. I feel a little bit of hope when I meet with other kids and meet with teenagers these days. I think they are so much more open and accepting and not as hung up on how people look or how they present, or that they are willing to sort of engage with kids who are different from themselves and not so worried about labels even. I've learned so much from the current kids under 18 I would say, around this, that I have some hope around this getting better. And I think it's an incredible challenge. I think one of the things I hear repeatedly within the Duchenne community is that, especially when boys enter the non-ambulatory stage, that is a time where there's grief and loss sort of experienced all over again, because it suddenly becomes so much more challenging to be in spaces with same age peers, to physically sort of be in spaces with same age peers. And I think we have a lot of work to do as a society to really sort of facilitate that. I think some of the things that I often recommend is, if you can in your community, sort of participating in adaptive sports. And sort of also finding, because there are other kids there who sort of have similar challenges and are not going to sort of think twice about mobility limitations. And I think a lot of boys sort of find community online, but I also think that that's harder to sort of, there's still a need. I think we all discovered this during COVID. There's still something special about somebody coming to your house and spending an afternoon with you, and not just sort of being online, or that their mom comes over or their dad comes over, and then you sort of, through a series of kind of 20-minute conversations, develop a friendship. Like that's missing when you're sort of just using online interactions around this, but it's certainly better than nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, and gosh, so my son's 11. He's playing with the adolescents. But I've been researching that part quite a bit, and I just feel for our adolescents with Duchenne, between just the typical biological drive to gain independence, and then the Duchenne disease undermining that. It's,
Mhm.
I just, hopefully you'll have answers within a couple of years. Can you work on that?
No, it's I often say, and I think I would be curious to hear what DJ has to say about this too, but I think that one of the hardest things is that transition, because you're still growing and developing, your brain's still growing and developing, and all the social pieces are all still kind of going. But people sort of then literally look differently at our boys with Duchenne, and then it makes adolescence even a little more complicated. So I really do think it's important, especially with schools, to sort of set a tone and early and often around the expectations around integration, and finding peers who are also, I sometimes call them the protectors, having even just a couple of kids who your children are friends with, who will buffer them from the unkind comments or do the heavy lifting work around education, so that it's not falling on your child and their siblings, I think is often really, really important, and sort of maintaining those connections as they kind of grow and develop too.
Um, yeah, DJ, I would love to hear your thoughts. DJ's on Zoom with us, guys, for whoever there on Facebook wondering what's going on. But I'm sure he will be comfortable with me sharing this, that like you said, the protectors. DJ had one friend in particular. Who was that for him in high school? And that makes or breaks everything.
Yeah, it's those kids are really important.
Okay, so I'm going to read this aloud for everybody. DJ wrote in the chat, "It was absolutely tough. I had all the different dreams and aspirations and even questions with no outlet to express those."
Yeah. So I'm hoping, DJ, that by having these conversations about this great work that Lindy is doing, that the kids behind you will have more of an outlet around that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I guess we are trying to trailblaze for the next generation, as the parents did and the kids did before us. And I must say, I am not doing this on my own. My good friend DJ and my good friend Ryan are helping drive this machine. I'm so incredibly grateful for them. So yeah, I'm glad you brought up school. There are two chunks that I was hoping to get to today, but maybe if you're willing to join us again, we can
do it again.
Yeah, we can talk about the school and the education. We can talk about the medical care and how we need more support from those systems. One more thing on adolescence before I ask you and DJ for any of your final thoughts. But we have a fantastic mom, Lauren Fritz, who's a psychologist. She specialized in grief and trauma prior to having two boys with Duchenne. And she just said, it so profoundly. She said, our adolescents have to come to terms with their mortality when their brain isn't even equipped to try to start to understand it, or something like that.
Beautifully said. That's beautifully said.
It's just incredible. Absolutely incredible. Just to really define that juxtaposition and to be able to see it and appreciate it. They're not just teens being annoying like my son. There's some real struggles. There's some real struggles that need attention, particularly when they pull away from us, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, honestly, Dr. Colvin, I could just chat with you all day long, literally. I am so incredibly grateful for your time on a Saturday morning. Oh my goodness.
Pleasure. It was wonderful to be here with you and DJ. And as always, I learn from your community, which then helps us to kind of go forward and help others. So thank you.
Oh gosh, man. Agreed. Back at you. Let's see. DJ, if you have anything else to share, I do want to do a little little plug. That casserole phase. I found out a couple years ago, there's actually a nonprofit, I think it's called Lasagna Love, where you can call them and say, hey, my friend needs a lasagna. And
That's
they've got
fabulous.
volunteers. Yeah, they've got volunteers to make the to the family and drop it off. So I think it's Lasagna Love. I'll verify and I'll put it in the chat here, but I was just tickled whenever I found out about that. It's just absolutely wonderful. Let's see. So gosh, again, I'm just gonna go on with my thank yous. There's, for me, I really try to understand, I'm in the midst of the trees and I just really want to see the forest. What's going on and why is this so hard? I'm just so grateful for your perspective, your objectivity, your compassion. It's just,
Oh, well, thank you. I'm very grateful to be here with you. So thank you very much for having me.
And our last comment from our DJ, so grateful for you, Molly. Great conversation and very important area of our lives.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I will pester you, see if I can get you back again. Okay. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Saturday. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and be well, everybody.
We'll try. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.